All right.
Just still working out some kinks, folks. Give me
Oh
one
gosh.
second. Whitney, are we good?
Yeah, is it up?
It looks like it's up.
Yep, you're live.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, let's give can we give people like maybe a few minutes to join?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Bye.
Hey, folks, that was Whitney. We're just giving folks a couple of minutes to join. Of course, Whitney is one of our admin, and she was so gracious to invite me. To everyone who is watching me right now, hi, I'm Dr. Hopkins. My first name is Justin, and we're here to talk about some relationship trauma. But we're going to give some folks some time to catch up and join us. It's been a very hectic week for so many of us, and so we're just glad to be able to be on this platform to talk about some things with everyone. Um, so I'm just gonna just give us a few minutes, Whitney. If you would go ahead and just shoot me a text when you're ready, that'll be great. In the meantime, I'm gonna just check out a couple more kinks to make sure that we're good to go. And I'm gonna turn off my notifications on my laptop. I've got some folks trickling in. All right, Whitney, I got you. Giving you a couple minutes. No worries. For those of you who are just joining us, we're just working out a couple more things on our end, and also giving folks a chance to join us. And so we'll be up and running in just a few minutes. Thank you for your patience, and thanks for being here. Ah, I see your comment, Whitney. Great. Yep. And Whitney, if you can, just confirm that you can see and hear me okay? And Whitney, if you can, just confirm that you can see and hear. Oh, well, playback. Great, thanks, Whitney. Everything looks good. Great, good to hear. 8:45 will start. Okay. You can see and hear. Thank you, Raven. There's still some folks trickling in. And now I'm going to make sure that I have, give me one last minute, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, I'm just about ready. Okay, well, we can go ahead and get started. It's a little past 8:45. That was the marker that we set by one of our hosts and admin for the group, Whitney Parker. I am Dr. Justin Hopkins. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all. And I want to give a special thanks to Whitney for inviting me, for having me, and also for being very patient and working with me throughout the week. It's been a very hectic week, right? It's been stressful and challenging for all of us during this time where there's so much uncertainty going on in the world. And so it's nice to be able to just be connected via a platform like this where we can talk about some things that are challenging to all of our lives and hopefully connect a little bit. And I'll do my best to share some insight. Just to give a little brief background about myself, so I am a clinical psychologist. I went to undergrad at Hampton University and did my doctorate at Regent University in Virginia Beach. So I am a HU grad. Hampton is near and dear to me. And I do individual psychotherapy for adolescents and adults, as well as couples therapy and family therapy. And the majority of the folks that I work with are people of color, just dealing with life's challenges and trying to make meaning of their experiences and figure out how to cope, which I think is a challenge for all of us. And learning how to be your best self, right? These are things that are very important to life and very much a part of everyone's life. But today we're going to talk a little bit about relationship trauma, relationships in general, what goes on between Black partners, what happens for people of color, and why do we have certain challenges in relationships. And I'm basically going to be answering questions that you all submitted, questions that Whitney has shared with me. And so there's a comment box on the right. I have some things to share, but maybe there's certain specifics about the things that I'm saying that you want me to kind of key in on. So if I'm speaking and you have a follow-up question, or there's something that I said that you're not really clear on, please feel free to utilize that comment box on the right. Ask as many questions as you'd like. That helps me in terms of my thinking and knowing what to share. And also, Whitney, if you could keep me on track in regards to time, in terms of how much time we have, I'd really appreciate that as well. If you give me just a bit of a reminder of how much time we have, that'll be great. And we can kind of dive right into it, you know. But I want this to be as conversational as possible, so please do use that comment box, and I'd be happy to check that and be more specific in answering some of your questions. Okay, so the first question that I got from you all is, in your opinion, why are Black men and women so mad with each other? In your opinion, why are Black men and women so mad with each other? So let me say this. I do not think all Black men and all Black women are angry at each other, right? And maybe that sounds silly, but I think it bears stating. It's important to state that, you know, Black women are not a monolith, and neither are Black men. With that said, right, I think we've all been in environments where there seems to be a locking of horns, right, and there's this really like obvious divide between who thinks what, and the women are on this side and the men are on this side, and the women think the men are all awful, and the men think the women are being unfair and unrelenting, and there's just this like locking of horns that happens, and we kind of stand so we stand with our group, right? We stand with our gender, and we're like, fighting with one another. And I don't think that's necessarily unique to the Black experience, but we've been in those conversations. We've been in those groups where we see that happen between Black men and women. And I think what tends to happen there is that, there's one thing universally that really brings us all together. And that's our need to be validated, and our need to be valued, particularly when it comes to love and romantic relationships, right? We all want to actually be seen, be appreciated, and be acknowledged for our inherent worth, right? But specifically our worth to the other person. And I think there are certain experiences that Black men have that may not necessarily be readily understood by every Black woman. And there are certain experiences that Black women have that may not necessarily be readily appreciated by Black men, because we don't all have the same valence, right? We all walk through the world very differently. And so we come at life, as we often do, with kind of an awareness of our own pain, an awareness of our own hurt, and bringing that to the other, whoever that other is, whether it's the man, woman, or non-binary person, whoever they may be, like wanting them to understand. And it's deeply hurtful, it's deeply injurious, it's traumatizing when that person doesn't understand, or what's more is when they invalidate the pain that you go through, the things that you struggle with, the ways in which you've experienced life that are troubling or just important to you, right? So when that other side is not able to see what it is that you go through, then we don't feel valued. And that's when we get angry, that's when we fight, that's when we see this really big divide, right? And I think that gets experienced on both sides. I think, and these are stereotypes and generalities that don't necessarily apply for every man and woman. But I think one of the things that can happen is that Black women often talk a lot about the fact that there is an imbalance in eligible and dateable Black men of the same education and economic status, which is true. It's an undeniable fact and circumstance of our society. There are many factors that contribute to that, and that with that, they at times feel taken advantage of by their male partners, or feel like their male partners don't understand where it is that they're coming from when they're expressing what it is that they feel, or generally feeling objectified or not fully acknowledged as human and worthy of their respect, right? Those are some of the concerns that I've heard. And Black men, I think sometimes we can take offense to that, as if acknowledging someone else's pain prohibits our pain from being acknowledged, right? That there is an imbalance in terms of free Black men of a certain education or financial status compared to the amount of Black women. There is an imbalance, and that it makes dating quite a bit more challenging for Black women. I think more so, right? Women often deal with with gender oppression, right? That there is such a thing as male privilege, and there's an experience deep within that that's layered both in the experience of dealing with racism, but also with also gender oppression, right? That's very unique to Black women, and there are aspects of that men don't always understand, right? Like I, as a Black man, will never really completely understand what it's like when I'm walking to my car at night, right? And it's under a not so well lit area, and I'm just trying to get to my car. Like I wouldn't be clutching my keys the same way as a woman might, right? The threat of sexual assault isn't as large for me as it would be for a woman. So there's certain things that I don't have as much of a valence for that a woman would. But But when you're in a relationship with someone, you want to be able to appreciate and understand their valence, understand where it is that they're coming from, understand why it is they may feel the way that they feel and the experiences that they have, and really honor that. I think for Black men, right, a lot of the times, let me say this, let me take a step back. I'm going to get a little bit intellectual, right? I think across the board for Black men and women, one of the weirdest, craziest, I think, challenging things about our lived experience is that we live in an intense paradox, right? We are human and yet are not acknowledged as such. Like, that is our reality. The reality is that Black people are people, that we are human, and yet we're not fully acknowledged as human. And so there are many things that come with that. The way that we have to fight for our rights, the way that we are often the object of fear-based projection by police officers, particularly for Black men, right? The way that our lives are constantly under threat. And I think most folks in the Black community tend to understand that, right? I think on top of that, men were often socialized to feel like, to not feel, to not acknowledge our emotions, to not be in touch with what it is that we think, and to just provide, right? Our entire self-worth is based on our ability to provide, our ability to give, our ability to do, our ability to, in a sense, satisfy in a way. So sometimes it can be hard to listen to and take in feedback about areas where we're not doing well, to understand certain things that are challenging for the experience of the woman. But also, I think we pride ourselves a lot on being able to do for others, right? Because that's for a lot of us, that's what we've been socialized to do, be able to provide, be able to, and being this stereotypical version of the man, right? And so there's, when, in certain conversations, when there's disagreement, when that identity is being threatened, when we're feeling like we're not, this is just a stereotype, right? So this is just a thing that can happen when we're not able to do for our partner as much as we would like, or our partner is telling us we're failing in some way, right? You can see how the identity of the man could be threatened, and then it could end up on the defensive, and then they're not feeling valued, they're feeling invalidated, and then there are arguments. So what I'm saying is that in each of these situations, there can be times when the man or the woman is not feeling valued for who it is they are, what it is they do, the complexities and nuances of their experience. And that is why I think that is the majority of, if not all, of the bases for disagreements and arguments. And when you see men and women kind of go to their own corners and kind of lock horns and become really angry at each other, going back to what I was saying before about being human, right? Like, it is the Black experience to be invalidated. It is the status quo for us to be oppressed, to be invalidated. So we, I think, more than so many others, really need to feel valid, to feel like our experiences are true, like we're worth something, like who we are is appreciated. We need that. I don't think it is a pathological need. I don't think it is excessive need. It's a real human need that we all have. And when you have the experience of being oppressed, unappreciated, castrated, trotted down on, right? Like, you look for the people that you are closest to really appreciate you. So I think for many people of color, for Black folks in relationship, we really, really rely on our partners to appreciate us. And it can be hard, specifically when we're not feeling appreciated, not feeling understood, when our experience is not acknowledged. We really, really turn and lean towards our partner to understand those things. And it can really be upsetting when they don't. So I think that's why, right? Like, that's why we end up on this divide, right? Misunderstanding is the cornerstone of all disagreements and conflict, and empathy and understanding go a long way, but it's also challenging when you're in the midst of feeling hurt. If you're feeling hurt and invalidated yourself, you may not want to give that to another person. So you kind of get locked in, I want you to understand my hurt. And you might do that by telling the person how much they suck, telling the person how much they're failing you, telling you how much they hurt you, right? And that puts the other person on the defensive, right? So I think in order to kind of, get out of these situations where we're locked across a gender divide, like, we have to be willing to understand that we have the capacity to hurt, and that we are hurting, that and that others are hurting, right? So and be willing to try to understand and communicate our hurts in a way that actually welcome the person to understand us, to appreciate our experience, and to value us, right? We can't just kind of like berate people until they give in, right? But we've got to be able to do it in a way that actually invites people in to be receptive of what it is that they're sharing with us, and also help them to kind of reflect on what it is that they might be doing wrong. It takes skill to do that, and it's not easy when you're feeling activated and hurt. So there's more to say on that, but I think some of the other questions will get me talking about some of this. So let's go on to our next question. Question number 2. Oh, this is a good one. I think this could be a common question for many. Is it okay to date someone new even though you are still dealing with trauma from your past relationship? How do you get past this trauma? I'll repeat that one more time. Is it okay to date someone new even though you are still dealing with trauma from your past relationship? How do you get past this trauma? So I want to kind of normalize trauma in a way. And it's not in the effort to minimize really drastic and abhorrent violating traumas, right? Like assaults, affairs, like domestic violence, right? Like there are some traumas that are really, really violating. And also, I think the experience of being emotionally wounded is common to everybody, right? And that starts from a very, very early age. Okay, so we all have stuff in relationships that are challenging for us, ways in which we've been hurt in past relationships, you know? And one thing, as a couples therapist, one thing I really, really try hard to get couples to understand is that, and basically that baggage isn't like a novel thing. It's a thing that we all do. We all carry something into our relationships. In fact, we actually all end up imaging in our relationships that which we most need to heal from the past with our parents or with our main caretaker. So it's our childhood is essentially like unconsciously transferred into our relationships, right? Because a lot of our early learning is coded in things of experience, right? Like when we're young, we don't have the vocabulary or the mental capacity to process things and make meaning of things in a particular way. But we do know when something hurts. We do remember. Our memory is really stable and is strong around the things that pain us, and from an evolutionary perspective, that's really meaningful, right? We need to know the things that hurt us so we can know how to avoid it and move on. So we remember in relationships things that are hurtful, and we try to account for those in ways so that we can sustain those relationships. We bring that right into our adult relationships. And I think each relationship gives us an opportunity to heal that. I think another really useful truth to understand is that, humans would prefer a familiar pain to any sort of uncertainty. We prefer something that's familiar and painful to the possibility of something new, because it feels like we're more in control of that familiar. So too do we end up replaying the patterns of our childhood, trying to heal the same things that have hurt us. So I think in order to do this well, right, in order to try to work through what it is that brings us into these patterns that we repeat in relationships of our past emotional trauma, what it is that we're trying to heal, we have to accept the fact that we may consciously be choosing someone, hoping for a different outcome, and trying to working on ourselves or working on the other person. But we also energetically, we know how to do something that is familiar, that has parts that are loving, but also parts that are repeating the trauma and emotional hurt that we've experienced before. We have to also accept that part of our attraction to the other person is part of that familiar piece that may not necessarily be good for us, along with the hope of other things that could be better for us. And then do the work of understanding our emotional traumas from our past, understanding the ways which we were let down and disappointed, understanding why the way that we dealt with that was useful for the time that it was in, that we were in, and then learn other options for responding to our current situations. Here's an example, right? So someone, it's completely made up. This is not a current patient of mine, but it's an amalgamation of a number of situations that, a number of experiences that people can have. So a young woman, for example, has been criticized for being too critical of her partner, right? And as she, learns about herself and reflects on her own emotional experiences and relationship earlier on, she may discover that or recognize that, right, she grew up with a father who was very demanding, mean, or perhaps misogynistic in certain ways, told her that women should not be seen or heard, told her that children should not be seen or heard, and that women were to be deferential, right? But then she learned over time that the only way to get her needs met were to be more aggressive, right? People ignored her when she was deferential. People looked the other way when she was passive or kind or deferential, like her father had insisted. But over time, she then learned that the only way she could get her needs met or her attention was to actually assert herself. That aggression was one way that people would then actually listen up. She could protect herself, get her needs met, and accomplish the things that she needed to in life. So then, right, in her current relationships, she then comes to a place where I'm just now seeing you all's comments. It wasn't scrolling initially. There we go. We come to she may come to a place where her partner's then, really complaining about her being critical. And so, it's for her, it's kind of recognizing that maybe she doesn't need to be aggressive when she is assertive, or that she doesn't need to be so critical in order to get her needs met, that her partner hears her, right? But that she can still use her aggression and use her assertiveness in ways that don't also injure her partner or make him or her feel useless or worthless, right? So that's kind of the internal work of recognizing some of your own experiences in relationship, and then being able to understand what you did to adapt to that situation and how you brought that into your current relationship. I'll give one more example. A young man who grew up with one absent parent, and he remembers having to do a number of things on his own, and feeling particularly at times when he really desired for that parent to be there, right? He desired for that parent to be there, to show up, to support him. He saw the other kids appreciating their parents being present. He saw the other kids having help, right? And so he really wanted them to be there, but he was also met with a lot of pain because that desire was never fulfilled, because they would leave him hanging. He would be abandoned. He'd have to do it on his own. So he learned then to be self-sufficient, right? To not rely on other people. In collaborations, he becomes really impatient and then ends up doing it himself, right? Or he struggles in team projects to rely on the other person to do their part, because his sense is they're not gonna follow through. They're gonna end up kind of dropping the ball, and he's gonna be left feeling abandoned again. And so he's learned to meet that desire for relationship, desire for support, with some fear. And in a romantic relationship in his adult life, right, if you don't collaborate, you're gonna run into a lot of issues. You're gonna run into a lot of problems. You won't be able to negotiate, to share. And on top of that, for a lot of us men, we're socialized to not even know what it is that we're feeling or why. So in those moments when we're anxious, we can't even explain what it is that we're anxious of, and we just got to go do, We just got to go do, you know. But it's important for us to take the time to process and understand what our emotional reactions about, so we can more effectively understand who we are, why we are, and then be able to communicate that with our partners, to be able to say, hey, hon, like, actually, when I'm asking you to do something, it always brings me back to that place where I'm being left behind, and where my desire is being met with abandonment and frustration and lots of hurt. And I've learned to meet that desire by doing it myself, which I know doesn't actually allow space for you, right? That's the level of communication you want to get to, and it takes a lot of self-work to get there. So in terms of not bringing your traumas into other relationships, you will. We all do, right? You will. That's be kind with yourself and know that you will, because that's what we do as humans. And again, it's the very thing that we need to heal in our lives that we end up bringing into relationship and having to work out through our partner. And so the relationships are an amazing learning experience, but they're so incredibly challenging because they bring that they bring your deepest concerns, your deepest fears, your deepest emotional wounds to the fore. And so it's hard work. Relationships are incredibly hard work, but therapy also can be really, really helpful. Let's keep it moving, guys. I'll move to question number 3. This will be quick because this is kind of like the first question. The first question for those who just joined was, in your opinion, why are black men and women so mad with each other? This third question is, what are some of the major issues you see with black couples? I don't think there's anything uniquely pathological about black love. I think we struggle with a lot of the same things that other people struggle with. As I said earlier, right, we all need to be validated. And because there's a lot of pain in the black community, however, like, I think there is a great need to be validated, and we have to work hard to understand each other's perspectives. The only other thing I'll add to that is that a lot of times, like, if you're with someone, you want to make them happy, right? We all want to make our partners happy. It is really humbling, and sometimes embarrassing, or just plain hurtful, to be told that you're not doing it well. In other words, when your partner has an issue with you, they're essentially communicating with you that you're not loving me the right way. And you can kind of take that with some offense, right? If you hear it in a certain light, like, it's hard to hear that, right? We all want to love our partners and feel like we're loving them well. But again, when someone's complaining, when someone's, they really are telling you're not doing it right. And that's hard. That's really hard. But the truth is, right, everyone's different. Everyone's needs are different. No one has the same psychology. No one has the same emotional, physical, or spiritual needs, right? We have to teach people how to love us, and we have to be willing to learn how to love our partners. What comes with that learning process is an acknowledgement that you don't already know, which includes receiving and processing the fact that you can do things that hurt or disappoint the other person. It's humbling. It's hard, right? Because you may be trying really hard to love them, right? But again, we bring into those relationships the same things that we need to work out and heal. So it's not just you. It's not really just you. It's, right, in any situation in relationships, it's not just the partner. This is the major relational issue of their life that they're also working out with you. And it's intense with you because you're their love partner. So also acknowledge that it's not completely you, and it is also you. And you're in the space where you could actually help them work through that, or you yourself can learn how to be a better partner and learn how to love them better. So to that end, we would all do good if we could let go of our personal attachment to our own goodness. We would all fare a lot better in relationships if we're really willing to let go of our personal attachment to our own goodness. If we're willing to kind of understand that we're not going to love each other the right way all the time, that we are going to invalidate and hurt each other occasionally because we don't automatically know how to love everyone perfectly, you can then learn effectively how to love your partner the right way. there will be a learning curve. I don't care who you are, how great you are at loving, how much of an empath you are, what you do for a living, what valence you have of life. You will need to learn how to love your partner because they're a different person from you, and you don't know everything about who they are, where their emotional wounds are. So that learning process is humbling. It's hard. And for the person who's hurt in that situation, and both partners will be at some point, right? Each partner will disappoint each other at some point. Like for whoever is feeling the disappointment and being hurt, you've got to be willing to communicate that hurt in a way that, again, invites that person to understand you, that gives grace, that affords patience without abandoning yourself in the moment, without letting go of that need or trying to ignore that need, because that's where resentment builds up, and that's when you won't actually get fulfilled, and that's when you can give way to narcissistic abuse, when you continue to abandon yourself. So to that end, I guess, relationships take work, guys. They really do. It takes an openness and a balance between not abandoning yourself and also being patient and willing to learn during the process. So I think that's something that plagues all couples, and certainly Black couples. Not more, or not specifically, but all of us, really, all of us. All right, so question 4. After a breakup, divorce or death, should you wait to date again? After a breakup, divorce or death, should you wait to date again? This is a good one. This is a really good one. So, if that partner, if you were in a serious relationship with that partner, and they passed away, or there's a breakup, or separation, right? If you guys were solid at any one point or time, or you've been dating for a long time, right? That relationship was real. The truth is, when someone departs from your life, we all experience some sort of fear and uncertainty. There's a big change when someone leaves your life, when someone is no longer your partner, and we need to be able to process and make meaning of that uncertainty and recognize what it is that we're feeling before we move on, right? Like if you're kind of just going along with life and someone is with you along the ride and they hop off that ride with you, it can feel easy to just kind of replace somebody to quell whatever anxieties come up after that partner has departed from your life, right? To quell any concern about someone else being in your life, the fear of being alone, right? Because no one wants to be alone. There's that Drake lyric, who the F wants to be 70 and alone? I don't know if it's 70, but like no one wants to be alone. Belongingness is a basic human need. We all want somebody in our lives. So there's a lot of uncertainty after a breakup, and we need to be able to take the time to feel that, to wrestle with that, to be with that, because it's in being with that we find ourselves, that we learn, that we grow as people, right? And in that space, you learn how not to abandon yourself. You learn how to heed warning signs. You learn the difference between discernment and fear, right? Because discernment and fear are often the same until they're not, right? And we can kind of learn the difference between like what is actually a red flag and what is fear of intimacy in a way that is familiar to me from earlier relationships that I have. Is that fear-based, or is that discernment? Is there something that's really happening here that's challenging? But you can learn those things. You can grow exponentially when you're in that space of processing what is it that you feel after separation. Now, with that said, I don't really believe in those kind of the cliche advice. I hate cliche advice. I hate advice that's just kind of like popular. I think advice is easy to give and it's often wrong because it's about the person who's giving it, not so much the person who's on the receiving end of it. And as a therapist, I don't really give advice. I help people kind of understand themselves so that they can then better determine what would be in their best interests as they are more aware of who they are. So I don't believe in the idea that you have to wait for half of the duration of the relationship that you had in order to move on. I don't believe in the idea that you have to wait any prescribed amount of time. I just think we need to be able to be mindful of the feelings that we're having once someone has departed from our lives, and earnestly wrestle with that so we can understand, learn, and grow from it, and really encounter ourselves in a genuine way that can help us grow. So let's see. There's a couple of questions. How do you know when a person is past the fear and ready to embrace their future after death or divorce? Yeah, Miller, I think, again, it's about, being able to process the fear itself, understand what that fear is about. What is it about? It's about not finding someone else, not being married, not having kids, your dreams being deferred, right? Of being a mom or dad. Like what is that fear about? When you can make sense of that and understand that, right? And there's also nothing wrong with wanting someone in your life, but also know what it is, what kind of feelings that they're having when someone is left. Someone wrote Hui Kwan. I hope I'm pronouncing that okay. I'm sorry for the mispronunciation if I didn't. It says, I don't want to be alone, but I'm so tired of giving pieces of me and pouring into others only to be left drained. It sounds like, Kwan, you're struggling with some empathy fatigue, right? Or maybe you end up like some people do, feeling like they overextend themselves for people that they want in their lives, right? Giving too much of themselves and not receiving enough in return, right? And that can happen in so many ways, whether it's financial or emotionally, right? Like staying up, supporting someone who is struggling to support themselves emotionally when your job is very demanding and you end up tired and not performing well, and that leads to other issues. You also mentioned confirmed infidelity, and I pronounced it right. That's great. And right, and so there are things here where right, this person is kind of choosing themselves, right, and over and over and over again, and not really showing up authentically or being honest with you. And I'm sure they have struggles in their own life, right? Hurt people do hurt people, right? Trauma begets further trauma, right? It's kind of the tragedy of our existence that we all experience some sort of trauma, and then we play that out with other people. And you heard me talk about earlier how we bring into our relationships the primary thing that we need to heal from earlier in life. It is literally what we do. It's how our minds work. They're very complicated, and this is what they do. This is part of attraction. But I would say, right, in these moments where you are choosing his hurt over your hurt, right, when you are choosing to support and pour into and be there for him in ways that actually overextend you, that don't also refill you, you're doing it so much, right? There's something for you that you continue to, you end up abandoning yourself in those moments, right? Abandoning your need to be seen, your need to have someone who is committed and honors you and respects you and is faithful. So how do you fix it? That's a challenging question, but I do think it's about learning how to choose yourself, right? And to choose yourself, to choose what it is that you want, and honoring that as much as you possibly can. And that takes work. That takes a lot of self-work of recognizing, what is it that makes it hard to choose you? Why is it that you feel you have to or need to forgive or give more than you'd like to? What is it about your needs that it's okay for them to be backburnered in favor of someone else's, right? For a lot of us empaths, Quan, that's awful. That's you. You don't. Yourself doesn't deserve hate. I'm sorry that you feel that way. Uh, yourself doesn't deserve hate, right? Like I think this is some ways is like how relationship trauma becomes internalized, right? Where we feel like we are the only reason why you're in the situation that you're in, and you're not, right? It takes two. It takes both your partner and you. In fact, it takes more beyond that. And I imagine that there are legitimate reasons that you know and experience and through your body and through what you sense, what your emotions tell you, that help explain why it is this dynamic is playing out for you with this person, right? This is a sign that you need healing, and that there are areas of your life that are needing some attention and some growth, right? That you've been through some things that are rather painful, that have impact on you, whether you're aware of it or not in some way or another, that this situation is here for your life, right? So you don't like the situation. You are also not actively choosing it necessarily. There are parts of you that are motivated into this situation, but those are also the parts of I would imagine parts of you that are complicated, that are not fully understood, that are not fully being processed. And I appreciate your honesty, and I'm glad you feel comfortable being honest with us. I would say that yourself deserves some grace and some love, right? You're in a pretty challenging and painful relationship, and we all get into the kind of relationships that we're in honestly through our life experiences, what we've been through, and what we feel like we have to give up, forfeit, sacrifice, or tolerate in order to be with relationship and other people. And I don't know what that is for you, but I do know that you can work towards understanding what that is about, and then work towards reclaiming what is within your control and making different decisions. It takes a lot of work, honesty with yourself, but also kindness, recognizing that you are genuinely impacted by your experiences, as we all are. And yeah, Whitney, we're attracted to certain types of people because we're attracted to what's familiar and what we know. And we try to kind of work through that in our current relationships. So, Hui, I would, give yourself some grace. You're in a painful relationship. We know that painful relationships are really hard to get out of, even though they cause us pain. And it takes a lot of self-work. And so, and you're not the only one that's at the wheel. And the parts of you that are making some of these decisions, I would say you're probably not as knowledgeable about as you could be, or that you'd probably like to be, in a way that could be useful to you. So I hope that you can find a good therapist that can work with you around some of these things, because you have more options than you think you do. But in order to access them, you have to first access yourself, learn how to choose you, and learn how to heal what you're replaying with this person. Easier said than done. Whitney, to kind of better answer your question, I would say I think we certainly are attracted to certain types of toxic people, as I was saying before, and kind of replaying what is familiar for us, and it's good for us to try to understand what that is about. And honestly, there's usually something that is attractive to that situation. Whereas going back to what I was saying earlier, right? We're like humans prefer a familiar pain to uncertainty, even if that uncertainty could lead to a better outcome, right? And so even if it's to quell the anxiety of uncertainty, right? We may make certain choices. It's good to know that what that uncertainty is about, and finding other ways to resolve it rather than repeating patterns. I'm going to go back to our list of questions really quickly. There's one other question. I see there's a 10-minute warning, Whitney. There's one other question I wanted to answer. Here it is. How do I share my past 4 miscarriages with my new man without overwhelming him or undermining a budding relationship? The question of one's past sexual experiences often comes up within the first 3 months. So, how do I share my past 4 miscarriages with my new man without overwhelming him or undermining a budding relationship? The question of one's past sexual experiences often comes up within the first 3 months. So I think this is an interesting question, and how it's being asked is really interesting too. It's like, how do I share this information without overwhelming the other person? Well, you don't have full control over how that person is going to respond, right? And what like you won't be able to dictate how they receive that, unless you're saying it in a way that's really like obnoxious and out of the blue, which I'm not really imagining. I think I'm imagining for you that you're worried that somehow that there's enough emotion attached to what you feel behind that they're going to run for the hills and not want to interact with you based on what you feel and what this could mean for them as far as having children with you, right? And so those larger questions around like, can you, like, when do you talk about like having kids with someone? When do you talk about what your intentions are? When do you talk about the things that you actually want? I would say as early as possible, and right, and to do so respectfully, and and people will select in or select out depending on what they can handle, right? If someone comes to you and says, with my past partner, we had multiple miscarriages and it's what sank our relationship, I don't think this is something that I can take on or something that I can work with, then you know that person was not for you. And you know that even if they tried to like kind of work with you, it may not have worked out well because this is something that they've dealt with in their past, right? If you share this with them and someone becomes worried or anxious, is it an anxiety or worry that they are that you all can talk through and process and be able to have an exchange over what it is that concerns them? Are they wanting kids? Are they worried that you are going to be worried about not having children? Or are they worried that you're going to be really distraught and upset by trying to have children, right? Like, I think you can kind of share and see where your desires and fears kind of align around this and be able to have an honest conversation about it. But also understand, right? Like, you can't help the fact that you had 4 miscarriages, right? That's a part of your experience. It's a part of who you are, right? And so if someone cannot handle that or be able to talk with you about it or process it with you, then they're not the one that you'd want in your life, because they're not going to be able to be there for you in the way that you need them to. So if someone gets overwhelmed, then they kind of get overwhelmed. That's a truth of your experience that's yours, that can't be changed. And it's hurtful when people leave us or don't choose us, but it is also an opportunity for us to choose ourselves and make sure that we're not abandoning ourselves and that we're not settling for someone that is never going to choose us in the first place. So I would say someone wrote down here to choose you, vote for you. I think that's very, very important. It's so important for us to love ourselves. It's so important, and it's easier said than done. I think it is our life's work. I think it is every human's life's work to learn how to love themselves, to honor themselves, to learn not to abandon themselves, to choose themselves, and to be able to then choose their partner based on someone who chooses them, right? We're going to pick people that we play out familiar pains with. That is how attraction works. That's how humanity is structured, how our psychology is structured. But the people that are for us are going to be willing to walk down that path with us, right? To do the work with us of understanding us and understanding them, so you can more effectively communicate your needs, more effectively communicate your vulnerabilities in the areas of your life that have been scarred or injured, and be able to grow. It's important, right? Like, I think people often, right, hope for this fairy tale of a relationship where people are always connected and in sync, where it's just like, life is a roller coaster, but it generally goes like this, where you're kind of like together, parallel, and really relationships go like this, and like as the longer you go, right, like you end up syncing up a little bit more. But that's because when you are in sync, you kind of cherish these moments, and when you're here, you work to kind of understand what's happening, why you're in these different places, why each of you is not understanding the other, or why you're misaligned. It's being able to kind of lean in, being willing to learn, accept responsibility for your impact on the other and the other's impact on you, learning to listen to ourselves while being open to the other person. All so much easier said than done, but I think these are the things that are really really useful for us in terms of being able to sustain our relationships. We've got about 3 minutes left. Thank you for the update, Whitney. Do I have time for one more question? I don't think so. Maybe not. If there is a quick one, I can try. But otherwise, for you all, I'll share my information again. So again, I'm Dr. Justin Hopkins, and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in Washington, D.C. I have a private practice in DuPont Circle, where I see adolescents and adults for individual therapy, couples therapy. I also do family therapy. And I'll repeat very quickly that I think, since our theme is couples, is that I think the work of couples is truly about understanding our emotional wounds from our past, understanding how and why we replay them in our current relationships, because we all do, and then being willing to learn about that and learning about the other's experience with that, and being able to communicate around it, so that there's less of times when you're like this and more times where you're in sync. It's challenging. Love is challenging. It's complicated, and it takes some resilience and some patience. I can be found out. The rest of my information. I went on another rant. My website is right here, drjshopkins.com. I am a Hampton grad. Yes, thank you for sharing that again, Whitney. HBCU pride all day. I went for undergrad. I went to a PWI for grad school, but I don't really rep it. I really just rep Hampton, to be honest with you. I wish I could have got my degree from my degree from Hampton. So there's my website, drjshopkins.com. I'll post it one more time. I can also be reached by email at drjshopkins@gmail.com. But that website has all of my information. And again, I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I do a lot of psychotherapy. You all, it's been a pleasure connecting with you all via this platform. I think it's so dope that we have things like this where we can share information and just commune together and talk about things that we all deal with, right? Relationship stuff, right? We're all human. We want to be in a relationship, and there's always some challenges to it. Yes, resilience and patience. Absolutely, Miller. And HBCU is in my blood. Absolutely. Yes, please do share the information. That'll be great. Everyone stay safe, stay connected. We're all social distancing. I freaking hate that term. I really do, because isolation is a real thing. But let's all do our best to maybe remain physically distant but socially engaged and in touch with one another. So be safe. If you're in one of those areas with lockdown quarantine, please do abide by it. Let's all do our part to kind of get through this really challenging time. There's lots of uncertainty in the world, but I think spaces like this make it a little bit easier, right? Where we can kind of connect, maybe either put that uncertainty on the shelf for a little bit or just kind of tolerate it together. We all need that. So love you all. Take care, be safe, and hopefully I'll see you guys again. And if you'd like to follow up with me in any capacity, feel free to click on my website. You guys were great. Thanks for your comments, and take care. Bye.